The radical changes in domestic life after 1945 didn't happen through organic cultural drift. We are looking at a literal, structural transfer of social governance. Before this transfer occurred, the Western social order relied on a highly specific baseline, the traditional family unit. This structure served as the primary engine of social organization, a cohesive, self-contained entity that mediated the relationship between the individual and the state. This baseline rested on religious ethical scaffolding, fixed biological roles, and a permanent covenant. Because the family regulated its own conduct, it possessed internal governance. As seen by the absence of external connections, this self-regulating system required no state intervention. The true value of this internal governance was economic. By funding and managing its own domestic stability, the traditional family provided a massive fiscal benefit to the state. It functioned as a zero-cost social engine. That self-governing engine no longer exists. Its dissolution was carried out through a highly precise, irreversible four-step dependency chain. The sequence moved chronologically. Ideological shifts created social permission for medical technologies, which forced an economic reorganization of the household, requiring legal codification. The endpoint is state-mandated social scaffolding, permanently replacing internal family governance and moral oversight with institutional management. For any policy strategist or institutional planner, understanding this 70-year sequence is essential. It is the only way to effectively manage the inescapable, massive fiscal reality of the modern household. The first step in the sequence was ideological. In the immediate post-war era, the normative bedrock of Christian morality experienced a terminal erosion. The widespread cultural rejection of previous behavioral norms stripped the family of its historical ethical scaffolding. This breakdown yielded a severe strategic consequence. The domestic arrangement was recategorized. It transitioned from a permanent, sacred covenant into a fluid, contract-based association. Without a unified moral code, the collective consensus on domestic roles shattered. The collective duty that historically maintained multi-generational households was replaced by individualistic pursuits and competing domestic interests. This ideological vacuum was a necessary precursor. It provided the social permission required for the public to adopt the upcoming physical and medical technologies that would eventually breach the home. That physical breach arrived with the contraceptive pill. This technology functioned as a revolutionary social mechanism that physically bypassed the limits of the domestic sphere. The pill provided direct biological control over reproduction. It severed the historical link between the sexual act and family inevitability. Individuals gained a new pathway: strategic timing. People could now deliberately plan, delay, or bypass family formation to prioritize external societal contributions. By removing the factor of chance, the historical tethers to the domestic sphere were destroyed. Individuals were now empowered to seek their primary identities outside the home. Achieving this biological autonomy served as the critical bridge to liberation. For the first time, individuals were no longer biologically obligated to maintain a traditional household. This biological autonomy enabled the mass entry of women into the professional sphere. As you see here, the shift from domestic duty to career identity created an irreparable breach in the traditional male provider hierarchy. Building a modern career requires strict professional consistency. To achieve that uninterrupted consistency, child-rearing had to be extracted from the home. The household required a total economic reorganization. This extraction forced a transition to the professionalized service model. Care shifted from a private, kinship-based support system looping internally into an outsourced service demanding massive resources from state and corporate infrastructure. We define this resulting system as the surrogacy of care. The public and private sectors, through institutionalized classrooms and professional caretakers, were forced to assume the formative roles once exclusive to the self-contained family. The permanent fiscal takeaway from the shift is staggering. By absorbing the costs of domestic maintenance and outsourced childcare, the state now effectively and permanently subsidizes the labor market. This new economic engine ran entirely on individual career trajectories. That systemic reliance meant those trajectories could not be derailed by unplanned biology, necessitating a final institutional failsafe. The legalization of abortion served as that final institutional mechanism. While the pill offered biological control, This demand for legal codification completely decoupled the sexual act from family inevitability within the eyes of the law. This ensured that family formation was no longer a binding mandate, but a fully reversible choice. The bridge connecting the 1945 baseline to our modern reality was now complete. This final stage solidified the new domestic framework. Once the legal system prioritized individual agency over the preservation of the unit, the historical definition of the family as a permanent institution effectively ceased to exist. Over 70 years, we moved from internal governance to complete structural dependency. This transition is now locked into the system. Modern infrastructure is designed entirely to support the autonomous individual rather than the unit. The hallmarks of this modern landscape are total structural fragmentation and the absolute dominance of external career viability over cohesive domestic units. Because of this robust, professionalized infrastructure, single parenthood has emerged as a fully viable and prominent model. Professional income and state-mandated care effectively replace the presence and function of a second parent. We are left with systemic reliance as our inescapable baseline. Society now operates on a total and permanent dependence on state management to perform the daily functions once held by kinship. For modern governance to remain relevant, it must completely ignore the traditional model. The policy imperative is singular. We must focus exclusively on managing the immense fiscal and social costs of a landscape where the contract has permanently superseded the covenant, and the state acts as the permanent surrogate of care.